Charges of cowardice fly all over the place as the Texas police eat the biggest slice of the blame pie. But is that fair? Let's talk about it, y'all. Middle America.
And you ain't black.
The first time ever any...
What are you people? We're Americans.
We are Americans indeed. My name is Vincent, and you are watching Middle America. We are not left wing. We are not right wing. We are just right. That's generally the joke. I'm trying to be as kind of lighthearted as possible. My subject matter today is pretty heavy. And look, guys. This is obviously a very, very emotional situation. I usually end the show by saying, love your neighbor, take care of each other, because I'm a Christian. But, it actually says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. So I want to challenge you guys to practice some self-love here, and warn you of something. Namely, it is unnatural for human beings that we are so inundated with so much human suffering. The ability to see so much pain and human suffering is not what we were designed for, and we certainly didn't evolve that way. And so can I just tell you, you don't have to watch every video. You don't have to read every article. I specifically stayed away from the Buffalo shooting. I also stayed away from this, whether reporting or viewing, until I was at a space where I could mentally handle it, and then I plug out. I think one of the things that we've got to guard against is self-traumatization. So I just want to let you guys know, this is something that happens with me a lot. I will pull back if it's something massively emotional. You'll notice there wasn't anything on Kyle Rittenhouse. Wasn't really much on the Buffalo shooter. I didn't report on this, as soon as it happened. Although, if you're in the industry, the YouTube industry, you know that, you want to break stuff as soon as possible. But the issue for me is protecting my mental health. What's up, Larry? Protecting my mental health. And that's where I'm at with it. Now, Mike's in the house. There was definitely serious violation of SOP by the on-scene commander. Yes, I believe that is true. And I think I've got some quotes directly from the Texas governor himself to that effect. Okay, so I'm going to look at what's going on. Obviously, our friends at TYT have commentary on it, and so we're going to hear what they have to say. But before that, I'm going to allow the chief of police over there in Texas to have his say. Now, if you've ever watched this channel, you'll know that my family has a pretty strong tradition of activism. One of the things that I'm working on right now is ending qualified immunity in my state, as well as disbanding police unions. So I'm not a guy. Obviously, I have biases as a black person in America, and as a guy that's been part of the activist community. You guys know me. If there's an issue that kind of gets in my brain, it doesn't leave until I actually do something, and then I can kind of, rest it, right? So I'm gonna let you guys know right now, I have a bias against police. I just do. Now, whether it's well-founded or not, is not really relevant, but I do think honesty and transparency is important when you're doing channels like this. I'm not just some guy looking at the data. I'm a guy who is an activist, and usually find myself on the opposite side of issues with the police. Okay. However, as Mike P explains, the decision to switch from active shooter to barricaded subject protocol is indefensible. Now, I'm sure they're going to respond by saying, well, the door was locked, and so in that case, technically, if you look at the technicals of the SOP, he was technically barricaded in, because they're going to say an active shooter is a guy that is active, is moving all the time, whereas this guy was holed up in a classroom with the students, therefore he's no longer an active shooter. It's a barricaded situation, blah, 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 blah. That's what they're going to say. That's what I'm assuming they're going to say, and it's one of those things, I think, where if you operate from the letter of the law, they're probably right. But it's not something that's going to get, that's going to translate it well to regular American citizens. Certainly not American citizens that have children that go to school. Okay. So I'm gonna let the cops have their day, and then we're gonna look at what TYT has to say about it, because they're pretty exercised about it, and then I'll give my my commentary. You know, the Buffalo shooting was staged, right? No, Ernie, I don't believe that the shooting in Buffalo was staged. I don't think it was. Okay, here we go. So there's our friend, the chief of police over there in Texas. So let's allow the chief of police to have his day, because like I said, even if you have a bias, you still have to listen to the other side before you give your points. Like that's only fair, right? Okay, so let's let this governor make his point, and then we'll take it from there, huh? Okay, so here, sorry, the governor, not the governor, the chief of police. Here we go.
Go with an open heart,
guys,
and a curious mind.
Let me
and
know
you'll find
if you can hear this. Let me know if you can hear this system audio.
Be curious.
You say there were 19 officers gathered in the hallway or somewhere. What efforts were made to try and break through that door? You say it was locked. What efforts were the officers making to try and break through either that door or another door to get inside that classroom?
None at that time. The on-scene commander at the time believed that it had transitioned from an active shooter to a barricaded subject.
You have people who are alive,
okay,
children who are caught.
So that's as Mike was telling us. Mike was telling us that the transition from an active shooter to a barricaded subject, according to Mike P, is unconscionable. Now, if this is the right Mike P that I know a Mike that was a law enforcement officer for, I think he retired as one. So if it's the same Mike, he knows what he's talking about from experience. We continue. So you guys get this, right? It's an active shooter situation. There's a different profile for how you address an active shooter situation versus how you address a barricaded subject, okay?
Calling 911 saying, please send the police. They are alive in that classroom. There are lives that are at risk.
Hey,
that's not protocol, is it?
We're well aware of that.
Right, yeah. But why was this decision made not to go in and rescue these children?
Again, you know, the on-scene commander considered it a barricaded subject and that there was time and there were no more children at risk. Obviously, you know, based upon the information we have, there were children in that classroom that were at risk, and it was, in fact, still an active shooter situation and not a barricaded subject. There was 19 officers in there. In fact, there was plenty of officers to do whatever needed to be done, with one exception, is that the incident commander inside believed they needed more equipment and more officers to do a tactical breach at that point. That's why BORTAC was requested on the scene as soon as they were there. They executed a search, or at least a dynamic entry, and went in, and of course, that was not till 12. That was not till 12:57. With the benefit of hindsight, Hey, the benefit of
Now look, he's getting defensive now. He's he's getting defensive because obviously folks ain't trying to hear that. Not when you're watching 6 hours of news and you're seeing these horrible pictures of these beautiful kids that are no longer here with us. So we're not trying to hear that. But you can imagine his folks are being vilified all over the United States of America. He said there were 19 officers there. And now he's appealing to the minutia. And again, I don't know if Elio Mike will agree on this. I mean, Elio Mike was 13 years SRT. I've got a very close family member who's about to complete HRT training at the highest levels. And so this is a conversation we've had multiple conversations about these situations. So this guy is extremely defensive right now for obvious reasons. And so he's trying to get control back of the situation. Let's check it out.
stand by. Hey, stand by. Hey, stand by. All right. I got it. I got it. Okay. Hey, from the benefit of hindsight, where I'm sitting now.
Just so you guys know, okay, so Ernie Eastman is a friend of mine. He's saying that because he didn't see a lot of blood spatter in the video where the kid was in the Buffalo shooter, that it was staged. Guys, this doesn't happen like the movies. As far as blood spatter goes, there's a lot of factors that go into that. The proximity, the caliber of the weapon system being used, the area on the body where you get struck. For example, a head wound is going to bleed like crazy, even though it's like a half centimeter. You don't have to get shot. I mean, I could shoot you through and through, and it won't look like anything, but I could get a slight razor across your head and the blood would be everywhere. It look like a horror movie. So I don't think it's wise to gauge the veracity of the video by how much blood you saw. That's not how it works. So the fact that there wasn't dramatic blood splatter, Ernie, doesn't mean that the shooting didn't happen, okay? You can even look at some pictures of World War II. And there are lots of times when guys get hit and they're dead and you don't even understand why, okay? So there's a lot of guys that get hit, don't even know they're getting hit because, again, there's a lot of factors that goes into how dramatic the scene looks when you get hit. I'm sure Elio Mike can back me up in the comment section. This part is almost done. Then we're going to get to TYT. We continue.
Okay. Hey, from the benefit of hindsight, where I'm sitting now, of course it was not the right decision. It was the wrong decision. Period. There's no excuse for that. But again, I wasn't there. But I'm just telling you, from what we know, we believe there should have been an entry at that as soon as you can. Hey, when there's an active shooter, the rules change. It's no longer, okay, it's no longer a barricaded subject. We don't have time. You don't worry about outer perimeters. And by the way, Texas embraces active shooter training, active shooter certification, and that doctrine requires officers, we don't care what agency you're from, you don't have to have a leader on the scene. Every officer lines up, stacks up, goes and finds where those rounds are being fired at and keeps shooting until the subject is dead, period.
Okay, so that was not a very good showing for this guy, but that's one of those situations where you're never going to have a showing. You're never going to have a good showing in that situation because the fact of the matter is that there is nothing that you can tell any of us in the heightened emotional state that all of us are in that they made the right call. Now, again, Elio Mike is saying it's unconscionable to treat the mission profile differently from going to active shooter, which you just heard the officer say you just go in there and find who's letting off the rounds and take care of them. Whereas barricaded guy, it almost becomes almost like a hostage type situation. The problem is that nobody was articulating that there was any sort of standoff happening. You hear about a standoff. When there's a standoff, the guy's got hostages. He wants a pizza. He wants a private jet to Tahiti. And that's when people like my family member would come in, HRT, yada, yada, yada. Obviously, the rules of engagement are going to be different because you're trying to counterbalance sustaining the lives of the folks that are barricaded in there and sustaining the life of the person being barricaded in. Now, the profiles are different when it's a guy by himself that's barricaded in versus a guy with other people who are barricaded in. Then the mission profiles, the ROE is different. The problem is that this guy, there was no indication that anybody was a hostage. There was no indication that he could be reasoned with. He had already displayed hostile affect demonstrated by the fact that it was his grandmother who called the police because he shot her. So you already have a window to this guy's mental state. So it's one of those things where, to the letter of the law, you could easily make a case for a barricaded subject. But to the spirit of the law, I think the results are plain as day. They're obvious. Okay? Here we go. Okay, so, yeah, I mean, some people are trying to blame the teachers. This is ridiculous. This guy was relatively honest. Did you watch the 3 police news conferences before this one? That's why people are pissed. Yeah, there's a lot of blame shifting. You even heard it with this guy. He's like, I wasn't there, but there's a lot of blame shifting that's going on here. And I don't think that the officers anticipated such a massive backlash. The problem is that we saw you guys on camera jamming up the parents and things of that nature. And there's actually, we'll talk about that soon. But look, the vast majority of Americans haven't been debriefed on the vicissitudes and the inner machinations of when you're going to call somebody an active shooter, blah, blah, blah. All we know is that there's a guy who's going around shooting a bunch of people. We're not trying to hear any of that extra stuff. There's a whole bunch of you guys all had guns. And on top of that, these cops, we've seen you guys having no problem being trigger happy and killing people. They're unarmed. Now you got a guy that's armed and killing a bunch of people. Now all of a sudden you guys want to get technical. You're going to get slaughtered in the press. You just are. That's it. What they needed to do is create numerous distractions at windows and points of entry, all 4 corners. Someone who would have had a clear shot. I agree. I agree with that completely. But unfortunately, that's not what happened. Okay, so now here we go. Here we go, guys. Here now, that was the officer. Here's TYT. And so let's see what TYT has to say about this particular situation. And the thing is I don't know, Mike, but did they deploy SRT officers down there, or was it just regular, was it a regular beat cop unit, or was it SRT? I know they got tactical in the end. It was actually a tactical guy that ended up taking him out. As a matter of fact, I think I have a quote here from that guy, if I could find it. But I'm pretty sure, let me see, is this the one? Nope. Anyway, he said eventually they called in a TAC team and the TAC folks took care of it. But 19 kids too late. Okay, now here's TYT's opinion of the situation. You can just imagine where they're gonna go. So let's check this out.
Even though there were multiple armed police officers just outside the school, Robb Elementary School, where the mass shooting occurred in Uvalde, Texas, it took them an hour to do anything about it. In fact, they were far more concerned in putting literal parents, begging them to do something in handcuffs, than they were interested in barging in and doing their jobs to save those children. So I want to start off with this video. Someone who was on the scene at the time was recording as the parents were begging the police to do something. One of the parents was tackled to the ground and pepper sprayed. It's hard to see it because the person who was filming this wasn't holding the camera steadily and all of that, but at least you get a sense of the chaotic situation. Let's take a look. They later put a mother in handcuffs because she was asking them too aggressively to go in and save her children. We'll get to those details in just a moment, but I want to give you the timeline because it's now become abundantly clear that police officials are either lying to reporters or they're withholding information, because we were also told that there was an armed resource officer who engaged with the shooter prior to the shooter going into that 4th grade classroom and barricading himself.
I heard that too. Does anybody have any intel on that? Because I'm not, like I said, I've kept a very circumspect view of this. I'm not going down into the minutia to protect my mental health, and I really suggest you do the same. But I heard that too.
Now they're changing their story and saying that is not the case. So which one is it, and why are we getting bad information? Let me give you a timeline.
Because that's what happens all the time. I don't know if you guys remember this, but I specifically remember there were multiple suspects in the Parkland shooting. How do I explain this? Mike knows this better than me. Anytime you have a chaotic situation like that, there's always people that say, this happened, this happened, this happened. And it's very hard to parse out the timeline because you have sometimes 10, 20, 30, 50 people, situation like this, probably, 5 dozen people who saw the same event. And you have to take a mosaic of all of that testimony and try to find a way to recreate the events. And so it's to be expected that you would hear stuff like this. But there was an eyewitness that said they saw somebody running into the woods after the Parkland massacre, okay? So my point is simply to say, this doesn't necessarily mean that the Texas PD is lying or covering something up. This is what happens, unfortunately, in the fog of war. And unfortunately, the school was really a war zone. It really was. I don't know how else anybody can look at it. It was a war zone. And as, Mike says, I come from a different background, but, maybe adjacent. Very chaotic. Many versions of there are as witnesses, correct? So this is Anna speaking. I'm not saying this insulting. I'm saying this is Anna speaking like a person who's unfamiliar with the craft. And that's okay. And she is all of us. My problem is, get in front of the American people and tell us, yeah, man, this is what happens. Like in these chaotic situations. The problem is, it was such a bad call. I mean, they deployed. Let me see. I'm looking at what Mike is saying here because he's got the expertise in the situation. The initial response were city and school department PD. And state, no particular tactical unit until Bortak arrived. That's you should know that you're in a dynamic situation. It's a freaking school shooter, and the guy is enclosed. So if he's in an enclosed area, you want somebody that has, for example, CQB training. The tactical guys should have been the first folks on the scene. They should have been deployed first. That I could say pretty clearly. You should already have an SOP that triggers tactical folks the minute you see an active shooter situation. Whether it's barricaded with hostage, barricaded singular, or active shooter, you're gonna need tactical folks, especially when you have to use discriminatory fire. Shoot the shooters, don't shoot the no-shoots. So that's one where I could say, what the hell is going on? But as far as like the variance in the storyline, I get it where she's coming from, but I also understand where the police are coming from with that one.
On reporting from the Washington Post, this is what shows that police did nothing for about an hour. Authorities agree that the gunman was dead by 1 p.m., but have offered conflicting accounts as to whether the attack began around 11:30 a.m. or closer to noon. By 11:43 a.m., the school announced on Facebook that it was under lockdown. Remember that time, 11:43 a.m. Citing gunshots in the area. The students and staff are safe in the building, it said. Now, in public transmissions on a radio channel used by local EMS workers, Someone said at 11:53 a.m. that a lieutenant had requested a response to the area of the school. As the response was discussed, one official was heard telling first responders, "Please just stay back."
Okay.
By 12:10 p.m.
Which first responder? Are we talking about EMT or are we talking about the regular beat cops? We continue.
A Facebook live stream recorded outside the front of the school showed police cars had established a perimeter. Helicopters were flying overhead and onlookers had gathered. 7 minutes later, school authorities announced on social media there was an active shooter at Robb Elementary. Now, after hearing the shooting, authorities said a tactical team formed a stack formation and eventually breached the classroom door and killed Ramos, the shooter, in a shootout. Ramos was in.
Okay, so you got a stack. The first guy up is the meat shield. He opens the door, and then your lead guy. You guys know what a stack is, right? You're going up, and you're gonna breach and engage, right? And the first guy's the meat shield. You eat all the cordite. fun times. And then they went inside and took care of Mr. Ramos pretty quickly in a shootout.
In the room for some time before police entered, and it was unclear whether he killed the students when he first barricaded himself or just before the police breached the room. Now here's where it gets interesting, and it proves that they clearly had done nothing for about an hour. Sean, and you're a teacher. Salute to you, by the way. Border Patrol is federal. Yeah, I heard it was a Border Patrol guy that took him out, but I don't think that that's true. I think it was just the. I thought it was a tactical team, like a SWAT folks. I didn't know if it was Border. It could have been Border Patrol, but Border Patrol again is they get specialized kinds of training, and they would be classified as tactical, and they get specific training. So yeah. So it wasn't SWAT, it was BORTAC. Okay, so BORTAC, yeah, it was Border Patrol. But yeah, those guys are federal. But again, they get specialized training for obvious reasons. Because think about it, if you're in the border, right, you're fighting cartel, right? You also have to deal with cartel. You have to get pretty good at discriminatory fire, that kind of situation. Regular beat cops, forget it. But he was in the school for an hour until those folks broke in. That is correct. We're still being heard at 12:52 p.m. an hour later, according to radio recordings. At 1:06 p.m., Uvalde police announced on social media that the attack was over. So, Cenk, we hear over and over again that we don't need to do anything to regulate guns. In fact, we just need more guns. We need more good guys with guns to protect us from the bad guys with guns. Well, according to conservatives, there were a ton of good guys with guns just outside the school who failed to do a damn thing for an hour.
Yeah.
For an hour. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, but but Anna, it was still a good guy with a gun that took the guy out. Like I don't use the good guy with a gun argument, but this is a bad time to try to refute that argument, because it was the good guys at BORTAC with a gun that did take out the guy with a rifle. I'm assuming the guy took him out with his rifle. I'm assuming he didn't go to his service pistol to take out this bad guy. So they apparently were waiting until the marshals brought a level 4 rifle rated shield. Come on. That's we got to be as safe as possible before we go in there. That's unbelievable. And it says a kid was in a standoff with law enforcement officers for about a half hour after firing on students and teachers. He was in there for an hour. Pretty much, sis. But of course, we're immediately going to go to the guns are the problem. Look, I'll tell you guys right now, if a genie could come to me and say, this gun law, this law will repeal the Second Amendment, but it is going to not even eliminate, but significantly lower active shooters by the rate of 85%, I would support it tomorrow. I don't believe that would solve the problem. Dear listener, Chicago has very, very restrictive gun laws, and they also have massive gun deaths. I mean, I think they're in the top 3 for the last 15 years. Now, not 15, sorry. For the last 10 years, they've been in the top 3. Chicago has. I grew up in the Bronx, New York. We had guns. I had a metal detector in my school. Okay, my school, getting into Truman High School in the late 2000s, it was like flying an airplane. I mean, you had an ID card. You put your book bag through the little airport scanner. You went through the little thing and the wand every day, and we had guns, knives, all types of shit in our school in New York City. So my problem with people who say we need to have strict gun laws, we had very, very strict gun laws in New York, and we were able to get guns. There's very strict gun laws in Chicago. They're able to get guns. So because of my experience, I don't know how that's going to solve the problem. If you read the manifesto of the Buffalo shooter, he talked about having a cocked weapon, C-U-C-K-E-D, and all he did was modify it. These weapon systems are not hard at all to replicate or to modify. They're actually pretty easy. So I understand the impulse to go after the guns, and if I believe that would be the case, I would completely support it. And maybe my experience in New York is coloring my cynicism about that solution, but it didn't have an effect on us. It's the whole judged by 12 or carried by 6. It had no effect at all. It just turned us into better weapon smugglers. And by the way, just so you know, these were not gangster. I was never a gangster in New York City. I was never a gangster. I wasn't at all. I stayed out of gangs. I made sure my friends stayed out of gangs. I'll never forget. We had this kid, Oscar. He's a really strange kid. Kept to himself, one of those straight A kids. And then he didn't make the airport check one time at school. And it turns out Oscar was carrying. He was carrying. And get this, they didn't even, they suspended him for 5 days, which is a week. But they let him back into school. Figure that one out. I said, Oscar, what the fuck? What are you doing? Nobody's even coming to you. Well, what happened was Oscar saw somebody get his face cut on the train, and it traumatized him. So he said, that's not going to happen to me. And he got himself a gun. So I'm just not. I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing how eliminating the guns is going to solve the problem. I do believe that this is a great case for Medicare for all, because this kid, just like the Buffalo shooter, had made suicidal statements, homicidal statements, harassed his family, did a whole bunch of shit. Nobody's surprised that this kid did this. It's the same thing with the Buffalo shooter, clear mental health issues. And what I'm saying is background checks, mental health disqualifications, and mental health help that's free, I think is the only hope that we have. Those are the only hopes that I think we have. I don't think that taking that saying the guns are going to be illegal is going to solve the problem. I just don't. But again, that may be because of my experience and where I'm from and what I've seen. Okay.
First of all, another fact about the cops: they did not respond in the first 12 minutes when the shooter was outside the school. He spent 12 minutes outside the school before he'd ever gone in, and the cops weren't there. And so they have not explained why.
Astrid is asking the question, other countries have guns and don't have the same problem with mass shootings every day. Is it the cultural problem in the USA has violence become integrated into our society? Well, Astrid, first of all, what Americans don't understand is the things that are normal in America are not the experience of everybody else in the world. For example, Americans are taught almost before they're verbal that those damn tyrannical King George and those Brits, and they were oppressing us. And you know what we did? We took up our rifles, we took up our muskets, and we went to work. And so the gun is what birthed this nation. Okay, our nation was based on violence. Not to mention the violence that happened to indigenous people when we came here, et cetera, et cetera. So Americans have an almost religious affiliation with their weaponry. They root all the benefits of a free society a lot of the times in weaponry and our ability to fight and kill other people. On top of that, we have a Second Amendment, which really, if you look at Thomas Jefferson, was designed that regular citizenry could keep their government in check. So think about the psychology of that. We're going to flood our country with lethal weapons because common people are always going to outnumber their rulers. And as such, that's a way in the mind of the framers. They didn't understand ICBMs, chemical warfare, whatever. They believed this way the government will always be kept in check by the people. Well, think about the psychology of that. The psychology of that is we have guns in the house so that if our leaders do anything crazy, we can tool up and get rid of them. That's the psychology. When you put that, when you stack that on top of mental illness, which is ubiquitous in America, and now you add all the financial and social pressures and social media, which is obviously a massively toxic thing, and you can see how people would end up becoming fixated with violence. So to me, the only way to and look, there are more guns in the United States of America than human beings. Think about, there's 320 million people on estimate in America. We got 400 million guns. And if you think about that, X% of those 320 million are babies and children. So we're almost at a state now where you have 2 guns per individual in America who would use them. You put that all together in a hodgepodge, and this is what we get. We continue.
It took so long to get to an active shooter. He'd already killed his grandmother. He'd already driven to the school and hung out.
Well, I don't think he'd already killed his grandmother. His grandmother actually made the call to the police. And as far as I knew, she was in critical condition. But that's this was taken a day or two ago. I'm going to forgive Jake for that, but we continue.
Out at the school for all that time. Or maybe, I don't know, they could explain it. Maybe they thought, oh, that's a guy with a gun. That's awesome. It's Texas, open carry. Carry anywhere you like. Oh, you're right next to the school. You might murder the kids. That's no problem. It's no problem in Texas. Oh, you killed the kids. Nobody could have seen that coming. No, we all could see it coming. So stop lying. So I'm going to get to more details of.
I don't. Look, Texas, as far as I know, has a pretty low rate of active shooters, I think. And I also, I usually have documents. I'm trying to defend the people of Texas here because I got a family member that, like I just said, is in law enforcement in Texas. I'm sorry, but it's not like Texans are these crazy, most of these open carry folks in Texas and conceal, they're responsible gun owners. They're not walking around. It's not the Wild West over there. So I'm not a fan of stereotyping these people, but it looks like TYT just has real animus and their rhetoric has gotten more and more acerbic. They're not trying to be conciliatory and bring us all together anymore. They're saying Republicans are evil, they hate us, blah blah blah. So now we have to go and mock everybody in Texas and pretend that just Texans are so dumb because all they care about is their guns. When in reality, look, I remember when Beto said, we're going to take away your guns. And it was a woman who said, I'm a Democrat. And she's like, you're not going to take my guns. I'm a woman. Some guy tries to sexually assault me. I'm going to blow his ass away. And if you try to take my gun, I'll blow you away. I mean, shit was crazy. That was the end of Beto's run there. So we don't have to go here, guys. We don't have to be like, oh, it's Texas, so they're dumb. No, these are very, very thoughtful people. I don't agree. I don't believe that it's, I'm a reformed violence addict, okay? So I'm trying, I, as a Christian, believe that I shouldn't carry a weapon and I shouldn't kill anyone, even in defense of myself or others. I'm trying to radically follow Christ. But to try to pin all these Texan people like they're just dumb and they just love their guns and all the rest of it, that's pretty low. And that's not what people from Texas need to hear, especially in a time like this. We continue.
How cowardly the cops are in 1 second. They're amazing facts. But look, I've told you this before, but I'll put a saying on it. You know how there's ACAB, all cops are bastards? I don't know that that's true, and we've talked about that in the past. But I'm going with ACAC, all cops are cowards. Now, and I'll tell you why, that one is indisputable. It's not because they're born cowards, it's not that they're less courageous than the average person. No, they go into the police academy and they're taught cowardice. They're taught you are more important than the citizens. And by the way, you can just ask a cop, if they're not lying straight to your face, they will tell you that it is emphasized over and over again, protect yourself first. Protect yourself first.
Well, Cenk is not really giving enough context to that. And Cenk, I'm assuming, doesn't have a background in law enforcement or any military or paramilitary or intelligence. Well, I do think Cenk has a background in intelligence. We shot a video about that, but that's for another day. But you are instructed to take care of yourself first in much the same way that when you're in a plane and they tell you in the event of a water landing that you are supposed to put an oxygen mask over your face first and then take care of the people around you. Because if the officer goes in there recklessly and gets himself killed, now there's one less good guy to take out the bad guy, and now his weapon becomes a vulnerability, and on top of that, his buddies have to take care of him. Cenk probably won't understand this, but many a time, some of the last words that a soldier will say as he's dying to his teammates is, "I'm sorry." And that's some shit you'll never get out of your head. Many times they'll apologize for getting hit because they know the tactical windfall of what happens when you go down. So no, police officers, especially in a tactical situation, are not taught protect yourself at all and every cost. But they will teach you the tactical ramifications of what happens when you get hit. And they do tell you, don't do that. Now, on top of that, they also tell you to come home. They do tell you that it's your job to come home. That's true, and there's nothing wrong with that. But to simply whittle it down and say they're trained that they're the most important and they're not supposed to get hit under any cost. I'm sorry, that's not how they're trained. That's not what they're taught. Especially once you start getting into specialized outfits that deal specifically with CQB and things of that nature. As I said, the guy at the front. The first guy at the front of a stack is called the meat shield. That's literally what they call him, is the meat shield. And you're supposed to breach, and then you're supposed to go through that fatal funnel. I'm sorry, the people that train to do that are not trained that they're most important and yada, yada, yada. So that's just simply untrue. Like I said, I'm no fan of the police, but can we just tell the truth about stuff? Can we do that? Why do we have to lie? They're not taught that, Cenk. They're not taught save yourselves over everybody. That's not what they're taught. Not even the beat cops are taught that. Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Which is the exact opposite of what we should be training them. The whole point is you're a cop that is there to protect and serve the community, and you're supposed to prioritize the citizens above you.
Well, they're law enforcement. Okay.
Your own safety. That's the whole point of a cop. It's like telling a fireman, Now, don't rush into a burning building. You got to protect yourself first.
Here's chaotic old bore. You're defending the officers. You're comfortable using kids to shield the police from bullets? No, I'm not comfortable with the police using the kids as shields from bullets. But what I don't want to happen in the midst of a situation where all of us are our emotions on high for good reason, I don't want us to start repeating things that are not factual, that are going to get more people killed and create even more distrust for institutions that we already don't trust. There is enough on camera to be angry at police about. We don't need to be going and adding fuel to the fire. Furthermore, I think it's much more damning to the police. If you really wanted to get the police, it'd be much more damning to say, you guys were taught citizens first, you guys second, and you put yourselves before the citizens. That's way more damning than to say that they're taught that. Because if they're taught that, Jenk, then they did the right thing. You see how that works? Let's be honest. No matter how emotional we are, we've got to be honest. Guys, that's my problem. That's my thing. Okay? We don't need to lie. We don't need to disrespect an entire state. We don't need to do that. Let's look at what actually happened. We continue.
You never do your job, right? But we accept it as normal. They say it all the time. Cops will openly say, we got to protect ourselves first. Well, then you're a coward, and you weren't born that way.
Okay, first of all, how do you know that the guy isn't born that way? Of course, that's a personality trait that you're either born with or not. What are you talking about? What are you saying? We continue.
You were taught you must be a coward.
Can I?
Okay, Jenna said, and he said, the cop says, I have to protect myself first. Which officer has said that, Jenk? Roll the tape. Roll it. In response to a situation like this, roll the tape.
Jump in really quick because something that I've heard repeated over and over again in regard to the actions of the police in this particular school shooting is that following Columbine, the training indicates that they are not supposed to wait. So I keep hearing that from intelligence officials who do their interviews on CNN.
I don't believe them at all.
Yeah, I question that. I really do.
No, there's no way that's true.
Because it's clear to me. I mean, look, it's clear to me that they didn't feel like that was their job. That they.
I had to review the Columbine video, the actual video, for training, and I was never taught. You don't get a simplistic answer as to what you're supposed to do in those situations. Okay, my problem in this situation, like when I'm debating about when does life begin, I appeal to an embryologist, right? If I'm debating is the Earth a sphere? Is it an oblong sphere? Is it flat? I'm going to go to a geologist. If I'm debating if climate change is real, I'm going to go to a climatologist. Why? I don't have any expertise in that field. So if I don't have any expertise, I want to quote an expert. Unless these two have specific expertise in the field, they're talking authoritatively about something that they're not trained in at all. So anyway, we continue.
Needed to go in there immediately. You have parents begging them. Imagine being a parent, knowing that your student, knowing that your child is a student at that school. You hear the gunfire. You hear it. And the cops are standing there. By the way, they were waiting for Border Patrol to show up and help them out.
Why?
They were waiting for BORTAC because they're tactically trained. Now again, I think it was the wrong call. Okay? And I have it. I understand. Well, I'm sure they have expertise on something, obviously. I mean, Cenk is highly educated. Cenk, I think, is a lawyer, actually. So they know stuff, but it doesn't mean because you have a law degree that you know everything. And breaching those situations in the close quarter situations when you have to practice discriminatory fire against an adept opponent is not as simple as just going in there. First of all, there's a hostage situation one time. A woman was in Afghanistan, and they sent DevGru out there to SEAL Team 6 out there to get the girl, and she ended up dying in rescue. Now this is SEAL Team 6 now, and all they were doing was getting one American civvy out there. You know what happened? Instead of throwing a flashbang or a stun, the guy used an actual grenade, and the shrapnel severed an artery, and she bled out on the way home. My point is, this is SEAL Team 6. This is DevGru. This is the best. This a tier 1 unit, and what they do for 12 hours a day is CQB, discriminatory fire, yada, yada, yada. Okay? And even those guys make mistakes. So it's not as simple. Here's the other thing. You go in there and you have no training, right? There's a room full of kids and an active shooter. How do you know that you don't take out a bunch of kids yourself? As a matter of fact, there was a very strange press release from Texas that said that they confirmed that all the kids were shot by the assailant. Now, why would we need to know that? Think. This is not the movies, guys, where you could just walk in and you immediately know where the bad guy is and all the rest of it. It's not like that. Now, again, I hear what everybody's saying, okay? An hour is way too long. I'm just trying to look at this from the lens of what can I realistically expect in this situation?
Like 1,000 of you there. We see it on video. There's like dozens of guys with massive weaponry, but they've been taught to be cowards. So they're like, what? There's gunfire in there. Yeah, there's also children in there. That's why you're supposed to go in. Oh no, but we might get a hangnail. Okay, so now let me give you more amazing facts.
We might get a hangnail. Can Cenk just simply concede or admit to the fact that he's never been in a situation like this? Can you concede to that, Cenk? It was a hangnail?
So, first of all, there's the woman, Miss Gomez. So she's the one that Anna's telling you about. So she gets handcuffed because she's complaining, my kids are in there, and I'm afraid they're gonna get murdered. And they're like, well, we're not gonna bother going in there, but we will arrest you, okay?
In these situations, I don't understand why TYT doesn't just say, hey, we're TYT. We've got access to law enforcement officers. Why don't you ask some law enforcement officers, dear listener, how do I know that all the adults out there are who they say they are? How do I know that you're not part of some coordinated plan to go in there and kill more people? I don't know who you are. You're not supposed to let people into those situations, especially when they're active. You don't know who people are. And if somebody's getting super belligerent, yeah, you have to arrest them, because that situation can get really crazy, especially in a state like Texas when everybody and their cousin has a weapon. Okay? So, again, it's very emotional to say, holy shit, you arrested parents when they were trying to defend their kids. They were trying to control a situation. Now, psychologically, you could say because they were too cowardly to go in there, they decided that they were going to do this, and this gave them the ability to tell themselves, well, I'm doing something. Okay, maybe. Okay? As Elio Mike says, the fact remains the first 3 to 4 responding officers did try to engage the subject, but they were shot through the door as they tried to get in. Okay? We continue.
And so they handcuff her.
Yep.
And that's marshals do that, okay? Because now at this point, there's like several different departments there. And they're all cowards, and none of them are going in. Except there's an important exception I'm gonna get to, okay?
Okay.
So, but eventually, Gomez.
I gotta deal with this. I gotta deal with this. Because I've been hearing a lot of folks say that, and I understand the sentiment, but I completely disagree. The cops don't deserve the benefit of the doubt here at all. It was pure cowardice and racism. If that was a classroom full of white kids, they wouldn't have waited on an hour to storm the classroom. First of all, a lot of those cops were of the same racial makeup of the kids being killed in the school. Okay, that's number one. That's number one. Number two, I'm sorry, but I don't know where you guys are getting this idea that if it was white kids, the cops would have rushed in there. Here's the New York Times. Parkland officer who stayed outside during shooting faces criminal charges. In Parkland, which was a school full of white kids, the officer, who was white, stayed outside while he heard the pop, 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 pop. He stayed outside. Bunch of white kids. This is Parkland. Okay? Look, here's another one. You guys remember the Pulse nightclub shooting? You remember the Pulse the nightclub shooting? Remember the Pulse nightclub shooting? 31 Orlando police officers sued over their response to Pulse nightclub massacre that left 49 people dead. Police arrested and or detained as many non-injured victims as they could. So I'm sorry, I just don't agree. I don't agree that there was a racial component here. Like I said, the vast majority of those officers, from what I could just see, were brown, just like the kids in the school who were massacred, okay? And we saw this in Parkland. In Parkland, the officers, the school resource officer stayed outside. He had to face criminal charges, and the 31 officers at the Orlando nightclub shooting also, they were sued. They didn't go in there, okay? So let's please not make this more than what it is, okay? We don't have to do this. This is going to cause more division in our country in an already horrible situation. I agree with what Werewolf says. The only component here was fear. Guys, was this cowardice? Sure. I don't believe that racism is the explanation for Parkland or this or the Ohio or the Orlando shooting, okay? It's plain old self-preservation. Dear listener, the first time I held a weapon in my hand, I was in New York City. My friends and I, we had just gotten into a pretty bad situation, and we got the best of a pretty bad group of people. And like I said, we were not gangsters. They were gangsters. So we meet at the park, and somebody produces a firearm, and I took it. And somebody said, listen, if those guys come after you, you're finished, because they outnumber us by a mile, because this kid was trying to convince us to join the Blood gang, okay? Because a bunch of Crips, our school was ruled by a bunch of Crips, he's a bunch of Bloods, right? So this kid's argument was, listen, you can have this, you can do whatever you want, Vin, with this, but they outnumber us by a mile, we need numbers. And my best friend at the time said, yeah, they might have us 10-1, but who's going to be the first to die? Who wants to be the first one to die? And you know what? He's right. These are some real gangsters, but nobody wanted to be the first one to die. Dear listener, when you see Cenk talk about the cowardice of these people, does anybody believe that if Cenk Uygur was hearing the pop, 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 and Cenk Uygur knew that this guy had, I'll just say an AR-15. Okay, I'll just say AR-15 because that's what Cenk knows. You think Cenk would have went in there? Come on, y'all. Let's be real. All the people calling these officers cowards, most of them have never been in a situation where they truly believe their life would be over. Dear listener, the Buffalo shooter was also engaged. He was engaged by a security guard, and the security guard actually got the drop at him and was able to let off a couple shots before he was dispatched into eternity with superior weaponry. He had his little pea shooter. Pew, pew. and this kid had a rifle, and he had body armor, and he knew what he was doing. And I don't know how many firearms or weapon systems Cenk has been around, but there is a clear tactical advantage between a guy in a rifle and a guy with a pea shooter, state issued sidearm. Okay? The fact of the matter is, let's leave the racial component out of this. We don't need to go there. And let's just say, point blank period, these guys didn't want to die that day. That's all this is. They didn't want to die that day. Now, do I think it's cowardly? Yep, it's cowardly. It's cowardly. But they also have families they wanted to go home to. The fact of the matter is, these guys were outgunned. They knew they were outgunned, and they didn't want to die. And some of them were going to die. If they did, let me tell you the God's honest truth. I believe a couple things. Number one, people don't realize, especially with the weapon systems we have today, how quickly you can dispatch 20 people. How quickly you can kill 20 people. People don't understand that, especially in an enclosed area. Remember I talked about the fatal funnel? Okay, so when you have a classroom, your chances of hitting a person are so much higher now because your ability to focus, things of that nature are heightened, and you have you have to be a lot less accurate. Okay, my point is, if those cops would have went in there, some of them would have died, and I'm almost certain they would have hit some civilian kids. Now, would they have saved more lives? I don't know what that number is. I truly don't know. Okay? They believe that all the kids were hit in the first 4 minutes. Okay? In the first 4 minutes, they believe that most of the people that died got killed that way. Okay? So, if my kids were there, would I want the cops? Absolutely. But understanding human nature, do I understand why they didn't go in there? Of course. Of course I know that. Of course. They didn't want to die. That's it. People don't want to die. I think it's horrible. I think it's terrible. I think it was wrong. But all this is people not wanting to die. And we're mad at these cops because they chose to save their own lives. And I understand. But here's my question. You think that these people signed up to lay down their lives when they joined the police force? Hasn't it been clear every time they kill one of us on camera that the first thing they go to is, I was afraid for my life? And it usually makes it so they don't even get indicted? These people are shooting unarmed people out of fear. We expect that body of people to go in there and lay down their own lives when they've demonstrated for generations that that's not their bag? So some of these, Sin is saying that's the job. Yeah, I understand you're saying that's the job, but you're not in that situation, though, Sin. You're not in that situation. It's easy for people who've never had their lives tested to say that. But I could tell you, I've been in a couple situations where I was almost certain that it was over for me. And I can't say that when it was happening that I was frozen with terror. I can tell you that when stuff was going down, it wasn't because I was a brave guy. It was because I wanted to go home. And I didn't want my kids to get a bad phone call. It wasn't because I was being a brave, virtuous person. I would love to believe that if I was there and my kids were in there, that I'd have done the masculine thing and gone and rescued my kids. Everybody wants to be able to say that, but you don't know what you're going to do until you're in that situation. You know, there's a very interesting discussion with Jesus and his followers, and there's old Peter there, and Jesus says, "You're going to betray me before this night is over." And Peter goes, "I would never betray you, Lord. I'm willing to go to prison and to death for you." Because Peter had an ideal self, but Jesus knew the reality. The reality is that Cenk and most of the people criticizing these police would never put their lives in jeopardy to save other people's children. Never. They wouldn't do it. I've seen enough of Cenk to know. Okay? So, yes, we need to abolish qualified immunity. I agree with that. I also agree that we need to get rid of these police unions that allow these officers to get away with absolute murder. And maybe you have a different psychological battery, but the psychological profile of a beat cop is not somebody who signed up to go into a war zone. I'm sorry. The psych profile, hell, the psych profile of a guy who joins the army is not one of a guy who would go in there and do that. Okay? We give medals of honor to soldiers that run into situations like in Parkland. Okay? Randy Shughart, Gary Gordon, rest in peace. They got medals of honor because two men went on and took on basically an entire city block because they were defending a down chopper. They got the Medal of Honor for that. Why? Because that's not normal. I think that the term is something like blatant disregard for their own personal safety, went into the combat, blah 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 blah. That's why we have things called the Medal of Honor, because they're enacting a form of bravery that is uncommon. The guy that joins the army for the Montgomery GI Bill or whatever is not the type of guy who wants to go and get killed in the army. I mean, those guys are Ranger Bat guys, all the rest of it. Those guys are hitters. Those guys are people that want contact. They want shit to get kinetic. That's a very, very small percentage of people in the armed forces, much less the fucking police. I am not defending them. I am just saying, can we be real? Would you go into a building full of people? You got a family at home? Would you go into a building full of people with a week removed from a guy who just took out a whole bunch of people? Would you go in there and do that? Unless you've ever gone into a kinetic situation where there's gunfire, you can't even comment. You're not qualified. So all I'm saying is, I get it, man. They deserve to get dragged. Say what you want. Say what you want. But no, I'm not gonna call this racism. Look, I'm no fan of police. I'm not gonna call this racism, though. Because as we've seen, there are multiple incidents where the cop stayed outside because he wanted to stay alive. The Parkland cop, he stayed outside. Bunch of lily white kids getting massacred, he stayed outside. Okay? Same thing with the Orlando shooter. The cop stayed outside because they understood the audio signature of the weapons the guy was using, and they knew they were outgunned and they didn't stand a chance, and one of them was going to get killed, and nobody wants to willingly walk into their death. They're not trained for that. They're not trained for that. I think people have a misunderstanding of what police officers are trained for. Most of them go through their entire career without discharging their weapon. Okay? And when they do discharge their weapon, they're usually in a situation where they're the superior force. They were not trained to go into a fucking war zone with an active shooter. They were not trained for that. The BORTAC guys were, and they went in and did what they were supposed to do. Now, Mike is saying that they got regular beat cops and school resource officers down there. Ridiculous. You should immobilize BORTAC or SWAT immediately, depending on who's closer. Okay? That is something we can... My point is, blaming the cops and being angry at their cowardice does not solve the problem for the next time. And denying the basics of human nature is not going to protect kids. What will protect kids is if we look at the situation realistically and say, realistically, what should we, what should be the standard operating procedure the minute that we get wind of something like this? Okay? And when you hear that, you say, okay, that should automatically trigger SWAT, BORTAC, whoever, down there. So maybe you expand your SWAT services. That's one of the things that happened in the military. You had what's called an 18 X-ray contract. And before, it took you a longer time to become part of special forces. And with the 18 X-ray contracts after 9/11, you were able to go directly into special forces without all the other previous requirements. And so what it did was it gave us a wider group of people to pick from to do special operations. Okay, now old timers are going to say, you kids got in here and blah, 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 and you're not blah, blah, blah. Okay, but for the most part, X-ray babies did okay. Okay, so those are the conversations that needs to happen. It's those types of situations where we say, should we have in every major state or whatever a specific SWAT type group that's specifically designed to engage active shooters? And we do. They're called SWAT whatever. Okay, we need to broaden the profile by X percent so that there'll always be a unit on call if this is necessary. Okay, so when you look at your population profile, you say, okay, we need X amount of officers to cover X amount of situations. You say, okay, I'm just making this really simple. Okay, we need 15 SWAT folks for the, X amount of people. Then you say, okay, let's have 30. So we always have a group on standby that can be a quick reaction force. Okay, and deal with it there. That is an actual solution. Blaming these cops and telling them to circumvent human nature and us from the safety of our homes, saying what we would have done, yada, 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 stop it. Unless you've been in a situation where shit gets kinetic and you've actually seen bodies drop and you're going toward that situation, I don't want to hear it. I know people said that about the firefighters in 9/11. I got mad respect for firefighters in 9/11. Dear listener, none of those firefighters believed that building was going to collapse on their heads. You remember how surprised you were when that building collapsed. So were they. I'm not saying that they're not heroes, but let's stop with this idea that we would have been the ones to bravely traverse that boundary and we would have went in there like Rambo and saved those kids. Dear listener, let's think about this, okay? There were about 20 to 30, 40 parents out there from what I've seen. How come they all didn't just raid the door and kick the door down? Only a couple of them got arrested. How come they all didn't just overpower the police? It's Texas. Half of those folks had guns. Why didn't they just get their guns and storm the door? Why did they allow the police to stop them in the first place? Because they didn't want to die either. People don't like dying. Now, I think it's terrible, but we've got to be realistic here. I'm not defending the police. I'm not a defender of police at all. All I'm saying is berating the police is not going to solve our problem here. Okay? So that's where I'm at with it. Okay? That's where I'm at with it. I agree with everybody. It's an act of cowardice. And what I'm saying is that 95% of the people calling these people cowards would have done the exact same thing because people don't like dying, especially when you have a family. And no, these police officers did not sign up to get massacred. That's not what they signed up for. People in the military don't sign up for that. It's a very, very small percentage of people that sign up for that kind of conflict and want that kind of energy. Most people don't. Let me see. Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, that should fix my mic. Okay, so that's the best that I could do on it, okay? Yeah, Alden, I know that they were held back, but think. Do you honestly believe that those people outnumbered the police that were there? So how did they allow themselves to get held back? All I'm saying is No, it's not this normal thing where people are just going to run in there and let themselves get killed. That's not how it goes. And I understand the police held them back, but it's not as if all those people were trying their damnedest to get in there. Okay, it's a very, 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 very chaotic situation. I agree with Mike. The scene commander dropped the ball. Absolutely. There's an SOP issue here. This should have immediately triggered the tactical folks. What should have happened, in my view, is it should have initially triggered the tactical folks, and simultaneous to that, you get the regular beat cops. The outside still needs to be secured. Okay, outside of the scene still needs to be secured. A lot of people don't understand that. When the Bin Laden raid happened, it was Dev Crew guys were inside, but they had an entire team on the perimeter to control the perimeter. You have to do that. So I do still think regular beat cops have a role, but their role is not tactical. And here's the thing, guys. You don't want that to be the standard practice that regular beat cops go in there, because they're not trained in CQB, and CQB takes very, very long and is a very hard process to get really, really good at. And you want somebody that's experienced in CQB with breaching, discriminatory fire, etc. You want somebody that is at tip-top level with that, because if it was your school and it turns out that your kid is one of the kids that got killed by a cop, you're going to be feeling different. So you don't want regular beat cops in there anyway, because I'm telling you, a lot of times those guys can do more harm than good. Okay? That's all I'm saying. So in my view, that needs to be part of the budget. There needs to be a tactical quick reaction force. That's, 10 minutes, 10 minutes beyond all other places, et cetera, et cetera. Then you get the regular beat cops to secure the outside. And, there we go. That's the best that I can, then offer. All our regular street guys got active shooter training with the diamond formation. Yeah, Mike. But I mean, was it really good CQB training? Like, I understand active shooter situations, but this was specifically inside of a classroom, right? Where they have to breach doors and cover the four corners and all the rest of it. Like, how confident are you that they would be able to make those decisions? And how the other question I would have is, how stress tested were your regular beat cop units in regard to CQB? Because that's a whole different ballgame, right? So those are some questions I can have.
Charger, and we gotta start our stream.
It wasn't high speed CQB. No, you're yeah. That's what I mean. That's what I mean, right? Like, you know this, but if you don't have, I mean, CQB is a completely different form of war fighting, and if you don't have that down, forget it. Forget it. All right. So there we go. I'm not going to say all cops are cowards. I'm not going to do that today, and I don't believe that there were racial motivations here, because as I said, a lot of those cops were brown themselves, and as I've demonstrated, the Parkland shooter, when all those lily white kids were getting blown away, he stayed outside so bad that they put he's facing criminal charges. Same thing happened in Orlando. This is not racially motivated. This is plain old survival instinct. Human beings don't like dying. That's my take on it. The solution is we need to invest more in CQB training for regular officers, but what we really need is a tactical unit that's more deployable, and has extra units on call that can function as a quick reaction force 24/7. Maybe instead of sending $40 billion to Ukraine, we could have reinvested that $40 billion to get folks trained up. Huh? Or hell, maybe even take the best of your beat cop unit and get them that CQB training. That's enough. There's so many things we could do, but we just sent $40 billion over to the Azov battalion so that we continue to use Ukrainian bodies in a proxy war against Russia. But that's another story. Anyway, So yes, lots of incompetence. I agree with that. Incompetence, cowardice, and complete disorganization. And obviously, you've got to stress test these guys. You have to if you're going to put them in that situation. I think the solution is more training and more units, et cetera, et cetera. We were on call 24/7. It was still 45 minutes to an hour to get on scene with all our gear and armored vehicle. Yeah, you're in Maine, right? So you would say we probably would have needed 2 or 3 more teams like you guys to get to everything. We'll see. Yeah, there's a lot of shit we could have done with that $40 billion, but we're gonna use it to continue a proxy war. All right, guys. Much love to you guys. If you guys are, thank you very much, Diego Rodriguez. Maybe we need officers that are locals. I'd run inside that class if my neighbor's kids were under fire. That's what we would all like to believe. I believe those cops were local, and they did. We would all like to believe that we would be those types of people, but you can't know unless you're in that exact situation. I've been in a couple of those situations, and I'll tell you that I still don't know definitively what I would have done. I have an idea. People have an idea on what I would have done, but I can't say what I would have done unless I was there. Because I've also seen people who have been in very, very bad situations, performed manfully, and then the next time they couldn't do it because it was too much. See what I'm saying? So I don't know what I would have done or wouldn't do, and neither does anybody else unless you're in that specific situation. That's all I'm saying. All right, guys, I'm way over time. Much love to everybody. Horrible situation. Rest in peace to all those involved. I'm just trying to look at the situation from a solution-based model instead of throwing up all over police. Look, at the end of the day, I do believe that the people that sign up for that profession are good-natured people who do want to serve and protect, but they don't want to kill people, and they don't want to die. Okay. Much love to everybody. I love you guys. We are, if you know about the other thing that we do, we're starting the other thing like literally right now. So there's that. Vin out.